Greetings everyone, I am RSV. Today I wanted to go over two really effective builds for conquering the Geolab room on S rank. Keep in mind with both setups you'll still need to apply yourself and it will not be an easy win still. And in fact, both builds can be applied to lower level versions of the Geolab. I'll be listing some of the upsides and downsides to these builds in the video, and trying to suggest which build you should go for. Keep in mind that these builds do have some wiggle room with what augments you can choose, and you will be able to change them out if you are in a situation where either you can't afford an augment or you do not like using said augment. Mastery 4 is best in slot for both builds, however I will not be talking about it. Just note that Mastery 4 will replace either Alt Secreta or the Deft augment. So let's start with the all-out attack or glass cannon build. This build is viable in the Geolab, however it has a much higher skill floor than the next build, so keep in mind if you use the glass cannon build you may even want to consider increasing the amount of health things have to reduce the attack, so that way you can take more hits. However, there are some advantages to this build that I will talk about now, and I will also list the major disadvantage to this setup. 1. This build will have consistently faster clear rates if you can beat it than any other build in the game. The reason for this is purely just because potency scales really hard if you have a lot of it, and considering your potency floor will be capped out in both builds, or close enough to it in both builds, I will disregard talking about it. Moving on, you can use all random modifiers on this build. Since you're already probably going to get one shot anyway, the modifiers that reduce your health are less impactful to you. This allows you to reduce the enemy health even further and cause your run to be much faster. However, keep in mind that if you enable Gigantics, then how fast your run is in comparison will be purely up to luck. Now here are the downsides. Well, for one thing, if you're getting one shot, that means you only have 2 hits to complete the entire instance. And this can be really difficult and really require either a setup that really takes advantage of countering, so you're invulnerable the entire time that you're fighting, or you are just really good at dodging and playing the game. Another downside to this build is you can constantly be on 1 health if you're using that modifier. And being on 1 health all the time, especially while fighting enemies for several minutes, can be stressful. So keep that in mind if you really do not thrive well in stressful environments. The next setup we have is a more defensive setup. I will not say that it's all defense by any means, but it certainly has a lot less potential than the previous build. The main difference between this build and the previous build is you replace Alt Secreta with Dreadkeeper 3. And of course, you take the Swartz armors instead of the Giant armors. Although, on both builds you can take the Swartz armors anyway. At the time of making this video, I did not have the Meseta to buy a full set of Deft Precision, and I didn't want to use my precious Addy Deft augments on this set either. So instead at the moment, I have random Addy augments, and I have Alt Secreta free on this build. While I've done a couple of things to mitigate the amount of defense I lose in this setup, I have lost a bit of potency floor increase. While this is true, from what I have established, I do not think that the Addy Deft augment is necessary in either build from what I can see and what I have seen from my testing. However, something I will say is, while the Deft augments also do not appear to be necessary, I would still push for them over using Alt Secreta 3 in this build, as it does drastically decrease your survivability with very little payoff other than saving Meseta. And reducing your survivability in this situation can be the difference between a successful run and an unsuccessful run, so keep this in mind. So what are the advantages and disadvantages for this set as a solo and group player? Well, you're trading damage for the ability to take additional hits throughout the run. This means that using a modifier that reduces your health or causes you to take damage over time kinda negates the purpose of going for this setup, which means that you have an active reason to skip these modifiers, which might actually be a good thing considering one of them causes Gigantics to spawn. And while with your health halved, you'll still survive up to 3 hits per health bar, at least in my case, maybe 4 if you have the proper build, it is important to remember that it kinda does squander the reason why you're going for this build in the first place. However, it is definitely more effective than getting one shot. Another advantage to this build is if you're in solo or group play, the negative modifiers affect you specifically a lot less than usual. While contributing less damage to the team, you are less likely to die and you're less likely to cause the modifiers to go down. However, since you can be hit more, you can still reduce that modifier, but you will still use less Rester over time, so you will still be a good asset to the team despite doing less damage. Another advantage to this build is it's a lot cheaper than the previous build, as you can run Alt Separator free instead of Deafness, and well, that saves you a good 36 million Merceta if you buy it outright. And the other thing about it is it's more consistent than the previous build. In the previous build, if you get hit by a stray bullet, you're dead. Well, in this build, you can take a few hits. It's no big deal. Lesser hits are to regular enemies are no longer something to be feared, and they're back to normal damage outputs. And well, this build has a lot lower skill ceiling. While again, it might clear slower than the previous build, this build is definitely better at keeping you alive. And by keeping you alive, you're able to do more of the instance more successfully. Hell, if you have enough health and you're pairing this with Braver, and you get knocked down by a small enemy, you might even be able to heal from it in the instance. Cannot confirm that, but it is a suspicion that I have. I've been RSV, I hope my guide was helpful, and I will see you next time.